The first time I realized something was wrong, I was already staring at the screen and couldn't look away. That moment didn't feel exciting or mysterious. It felt heavy, like my body understood something my head refused to accept. I had always been curious about things people warned others not to touch. Not because I felt special, but because I hated not knowing. If something existed, I needed proof. That habit followed me into adulthood, especially during nights when I stayed awake watching YouTube videos about obscure parts of the internet. I didn't talk about it with my friends or family. Those videos became something private, something I watched with headphones on, replaying details and comments. The deep web wasn't presented as fantasy there, but as structure, a system that rewarded patience and obsession. What caught my attention the most was red rooms. Not because of the violence, but because nobody could prove they were real. I didn't want horror. I wanted confirmation. I started slowly using basic tools that anyone could find with enough searching. Most nights ended the same way, with blank pages and dead links that led nowhere. That didn't frustrate me because it matched what the videos explained. Real things were hidden behind repetition and time. I found black markets, forums, and video directories that felt wrong but unimpressive. Everything looked transactional and cold. I never interacted with anyone. I stayed invisible, just observing, telling myself that was enough. Red rooms never appeared. Weeks passed without a trace, and part of me started thinking they were just another myth recycled for views. Still, I kept searching, night after night, following the same routine. Then one night, a red room appeared at the top of an empty page. It didn't load or animate. Before clicking anything, I sat back and tried to calm my breathing because my body reacted faster than my thoughts. My heart wasn't racing, but there was pressure in my chest that didn't fade. I checked the room, the door, the window, even though it made no sense. The red room asked a simple question about entering. No explanation followed, and that made it worse. I clicked yes, expecting something dramatic, but the same question appeared again, identical in every way. I hesitated, then clicked yes once more. The repetition started to bother me, not because it felt fake, but because it felt deliberate. Every time I answered, the page refreshed instantly, as if someone was waiting for that response. I told myself I could stop any time, but I didn't. When the room finally disappeared, nothing replaced it. No loading screen, no confirmation. I waited, staring at the screen until my eyes hurt, then shut the laptop and went to bed without sleeping. The next evening, when someone knocked on my door, I didn't know if it was influenced by my experience yesterday, but I was a little worried. I stayed quiet for several seconds, standing close enough to hear movement outside. A voice said my name and mentioned a delivery. It sounded normal, but my hands tightened around the door handle anyway. The moment I opened the door, everything collapsed into chaos. Hands grabbed my arms with force that didn't allow resistance. Another hand covered my mouth hard enough to hurt my jaw. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped. They moved fast and efficiently, like they had done this before. A hood went over my head and something solid pressed against my face, cutting off air. My wrists were pulled behind my back and secured tightly, making my shoulders burn. I was dragged into a vehicle and pushed down onto the seat. Someone kept pressure on my head while the car started moving. No one spoke, and the silence made it worse than threats ever could. I lost track of time as the car sped through turns. Breathing became harder, slower, until everything faded out. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was the position of my body, because I couldn't move. My wrists were tied to a chair, my ankles secured, my back forced straight. Panic didn't explode immediately. It built slowly as I tested every restraint and failed. Bright lights blinded me, aimed directly at my face. I tried to look away, but my head was pulled back roughly by someone standing behind me. My vision adjusted enough to see cameras placed around the room, all pointed at me. A screen turned on in front of me, filling with usernames and numbers that kept changing. I understood what it was before my mind could deny it. This wasn't a video archive. It was live. Men moved in and out of my view, faces covered, gestures calm and methodical. One of them adjusted a camera. Another checked the screen, nodding slowly. Requests appeared on the screen, and they followed them carefully, step by step, making sure everything was visible. They waited after each action, watching reactions, adjusting angles, continuing without hesitation. My body reacted before my voice did. I cried, begged, tried to explain anything that could make this stop. Nothing changed. This wasn't punishment or revenge. It was scheduled. I couldn't believe what I was experiencing. My curiosity about red rooms led me to this place as the protagonist. I just wanted to observe, but now I am the object. They began using devices meant to control pain precisely, not to end anything quickly. One of them placed clamps on my arms and legs, tightening them until my muscles locked and my hands lost strength. Another adjusted the chair again so my feet barely touched the floor, forcing my weight onto my shoulders and lower back. Every time my body tried to shift or resist, they corrected it immediately, tightening something else, pushing me back into position so the cameras never lost sight of my face. And after that, they focused on keeping me responsive. They poured cold water over my head without warning, then left me sitting there shaking while the light stayed fixed on my eyes. When my breathing slowed, one of them struck my leg hard enough to make my body jerk, not once, but repeatedly, waiting between each hit to make sure I stayed awake. The last thing I remember clearly was my vision narrowing as the lights stayed fixed on me. When consciousness returned, it came in fragments. My body felt heavy and unresponsive, and my thoughts refused to connect properly. The environment was different, quieter, but I couldn't open my eyes immediately. A voice called my name, repeating it slowly until it broke through the fog in my head. When I finally managed to focus, I saw white walls and medical equipment around me. My throat hurt when I tried to speak, and my hands were free but weak. Someone pressed a button and left the room without explaining anything. I stayed there staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together what was real and what wasn't. But my thoughts kept circling back to the cameras. My mother was sitting next to the bed when I fully woke up. She looked exhausted, like someone who hadn't slept properly in days. When she saw my eyes open, she held my hand tightly and didn't say anything at first. I told her everything in a rush, afraid that if I stopped talking, the memories would slip away. I described the website, the red room, the men, the room, the broadcast. I needed her to believe me. She listened calmly, then told me this wasn't the first time I had told that story. According to her, I had never lived alone, never owned a computer, and had no access to the internet. She said I had been hospitalized before after obsessing over crime cases, always convinced I had been taken somewhere. The doctors called it a recurring episode. I stopped arguing and looked away. I listened to my mother, but I didn't accept what she was saying. After she left the room, I tested my hands, my wrists, my arms, slowly checking everything. I no longer had any wounds, but I am sure that they did not all disappear. I tried to remember everything that happened in the red room, although everything is in fragments. They erased my memory. I'm sure they'll come for me again. I'm a middle-aged guy with a boring routine and a bad habit of digging where I shouldn't. After work, after dinner, after everything that passes for a normal life, I sit in front of my computer and scroll through the deep web. Not for drugs, not for weapons, mostly out of boredom. Shock pages stopped doing anything to me years ago. Most sites try too hard. Fake gore, recycled videos, loud banners screaming that this is the worst thing you'll ever see. It's all empty. It feels made for teenagers pretending to be tough. I kept digging because I wanted something different, something quieter, something that didn't need to shout. That night I found a page that looked wrong because it was calm. White background, clean layout, no music, no pop-ups, just a catalog. The title said, footwear. Nothing else. No logo, no slogan. Each item was a pair of boots. Same model. Heavy leather, worn soles. Under the picture, there was a name and an age. Like Brian 34, Lucas 41. Prices were high, but not insane. What caught my attention was the description, repeated word for word on every product. These boots were used by their respective volunteers. I stared at the screen for a long time before clicking anything. My brain kept trying to turn it into a joke. Art project, dark marketing, some edgy brand playing with ideas of consumption and bodies. But there was no explanation, no about section, no comments. I clicked on one pair. Carl, 29. The boots looked more worn than the others. The leather near the toe was scratched. The sole was uneven, like someone dragged one foot. The size matched mine. That detail bothered me more than it should have. Before buying them, I sat there, hands off the mouse, breathing slow. This was the point where curiosity usually loses to common sense. That pause stretched. The sight didn't change. No timer, no pressure, just the boots waiting. I told myself I wasn't hurting anyone by clicking buy. That whatever this was, it had already happened. I paid. The confirmation page didn't thank me. It just said, order received. 3 days later, a plain cardboard arrived at my door. No sender name, no return address. It was heavier than I expected. Before opening the box, I stood in my kitchen for a full minute, listening to the refrigerator hum and the pipes tick. Nothing else. No cars outside, no neighbors. That quiet stretched until my stomach started to feel tight. I cut the tapes and folded the flaps open. Inside were the boots, wrapped in thin paper. Under them, separated by a piece of cardboard, was a black USB drive. No label, no note, just the drive. I picked up the boot first. They smelled old. Not leather store old, used old. The tag was still attached to one lace. Carl 29. On the sole, near the heel, there were dark stains, dried, brownish. I didn't need to guess what it was. My stomach flipped and I leaned over the sink, gagging. I didn't throw up yet, but it was close. I dropped the boots back into the box like they were dirty dishes and stepped away. The USB sat there small and harmless. I told myself it was probably a virus, some scam on top of a sick joke. That should have been enough to stop me. It wasn't. I plugged it into my PC. Before opening the file, I muted my speakers and lowered the lights in the room. My hands were shaking, slow and stiff like they didn't belong to me anymore. I stared at the screen for several seconds, breathing through my mouth, trying to keep my stomach under control. There was only one file. No title, no duration. I double-clicked it. A young man appeared sitting on a bare concrete floor. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. He leaned closer to the camera and spoke. My name is Carl. I'm 29 years old. He swallowed hard before continuing. I don't have enough money to keep my family going. I tried loans. I tried extra work. Nothing worked. This is the only option I have left. He wiped his face with his sleeve, breathing unevenly. They told me this would be quick. They told me my family would be taken care of. Please don't judge me. Carl slowly laid down on the floor. His body stiffened. His breathing broke into sobs. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. From the edge of the camera, legs entered the shot. A woman wearing boots, the same boots sitting in my kitchen. She stopped next to his head. Carl screamed and cried as the boot was lifted. I stopped the video before anything else happened. I ran to the sink and vomited until my throat burned. When I looked back at the box, the boots seemed closer than before. That's when I heard the knock at the door. The knock was polite. 2 taps, a pause, 2 more taps. I didn't move. My heart was slamming so hard it felt like it was pushing against my ribs. I stayed silent, standing in the middle of the kitchen, staring at the door. Another knock came, firmer this time, still calm, still patient. "Sir, we just wanted to thank you for your purchase and share a small detail with you. Those boots include a small camera in the toe. You are not the final consumer. You're simply part of the show. We appreciate your collaboration." I backed away from the door and hit the table, knocking the boots to the floor. That's when the door handle started to shake. The knocking turned into heavy hits. Someone slammed their shoulder against the door. I heard glass shatter in the living room. Another window broke. Sounds came from everywhere at once, like people were surrounding the apartment. I slid down the wall and collapsed onto the floor. My chest felt tight and useless. I couldn't stand. I couldn't think. Warmth spread in my pants and I didn't care. I just cried and waited for it to end. Then suddenly it stopped. No footsteps, no voices, just silence. I stayed on the floor for a long time after that. I didn't know how long. When I finally stood up, my legs were numb and shaky. The door was intact. The windows were broken, but nothing else was touched. The boots were still there. I didn't call the police. I didn't tell anyone. I cleaned the mess and threw the box away. I wrapped the boots in trash bags and shoved them into a closet I never used. Days passed. I didn't sleep much. Every sound made me jump. I stopped using my computer except for work. I thought maybe that was it, a warning, a scare. Then an email arrived. It thanked me again. It invited me to a show. There was a link. I stared at it for a long time before clicking. The video loaded fast. It was me, sitting on my kitchen floor, crying, shaking, wetting myself. The angle was low, close to the ground, from the boots' perspective. The comments scrolled beside the video. People laughing, people sending money, tipping, joking. I closed the browser and sat there empty. I understood then. I was never in danger. Not really. I wasn't worth that effort. I wasn't special. I was just another customer. The volunteers were the product. The rest of us were the punchline. No one came back for me. No more emails. No more knocks. Just silence and the knowledge that somewhere people paid to watch me break.
For obvious reasons, I'm not going to reveal my name, but I just want you to know that you should never accept a job without knowing exactly what you're getting yourself into. It all started when Marcus sent me a message a few years ago. I was very surprised because we hadn't seen each other since high school. We grew up together in a working-class neighborhood, but as an adult, his life changed a lot. Marcus became a professional chef and his clients were eccentric millionaires, which allowed him to live a life of luxury, but a very peculiar one. He lived alone in a large mansion far from the city. He was also isolated from everyone else, no longer speaking to his family or friends. I always believed that he contacted me because he felt lonely. He invited me to his place and welcomed me warmly. We started meeting often after that. Always at his place, always him cooking, me sitting at the table eating food that tasted too good for how quiet the room was. He worked from home and said his clients preferred it that way. No meetings, no photos, and no public face. What bothered me wasn't the secrecy, but the absence of people. No friends dropped by, no family called. When I mentioned it, he brushed it off and said distance made things simpler, though his tone didn't sound relieved. He had money, but no life around it. The house felt more like a container than a home, and the longer I stayed, the clearer it became that he had chosen this isolation himself. One afternoon, I arrived earlier than usual. The gate was open, which never happened. I stayed in the car longer than necessary, listening to nothing, feeling stupid for hesitating, and then I finally went inside. Before I even saw him, something felt wrong in a very concrete way. The house wasn't silent like before, it was empty in a heavier sense. like a place after something irreversible has already happened and nothing inside knows what to do next. I called his name while walking through the hallway, forcing my voice to sound normal, and when I reached the living area, I saw him from the ceiling beam, his body still enough to look unreal. The rope was tight, the chair beneath him was tipped over, and there was no sign that anyone else had been there. I stood there longer than makes sense, staring at his face, trying to understand how someone who cooked every day, who planned everything down to the second, could decide to stop like this. His eyes were open, and that detail locked me in place more than anything else in the room. My phone was in my pocket, and I knew exactly what I was supposed to do, but instead I sat down because my legs felt unreliable and my thoughts kept jumping to things that had nothing to do with death, like bills, overdue notices, and how much money I owed. While sitting there, I noticed his wallet on the table, thick with cash and his ID next to it. I didn't grab them right away. I stared at them, then back at him, and understood that whatever I did next was going to follow me for the rest of my life. I stayed in the house that night, not because I felt safe, but because leaving felt worse, like walking away would make everything real in a way I wasn't ready for. I didn't sleep much, and every small sound made me sit up, expecting someone to come looking for him. The next morning, a man arrived, well-dressed, calm, polite, and clearly used to being obeyed. He asked for Marcus without hesitation, and in that moment, my fear wasn't about being caught, but about whether my voice would give me away. I used Marcus's name, and the man didn't react. He spoke about a scheduled job, a private commission, and a payment that had already been transferred. He handed me a device and explained that everything I needed was inside, including instructions and deadlines. After he left, I stood in the kitchen holding that device, aware that the house felt tighter now, less neutral, like it had accepted me but not forgiven me. When I opened the laptop and read the messages, it took time for the meaning to settle because my brain kept trying to simplify what I was seeing. The orders were clear, detailed, and impossible to misunderstand. This wasn't symbolic or implied, it was human meat, described with the same cold precision Marcus used when talking about food. I closed the laptop once, then opened it again because the money attached to those messages was already changing my decisions. Before starting, I spent hours walking around the kitchen, touching surfaces, checking drawers, trying to convince myself there was a version of this where I didn't have to fully understand what I was doing. The equipment was professional, the layout intentional, and every tool felt like it had been placed for this exact purpose. I followed the instructions step by step because thinking beyond them made my chest tighten and my breathing uneven. I focused on timing, temperature, and presentation, the same way Marcus had taught himself to focus, and I understood that this distance was the only way he survived as long as he did. The first delivery went out without issues, and the payment arrived immediately. Seeing that number on the screen didn't feel like relief, it felt like confirmation that I was already too far in to pretend this was temporary. More orders followed, closer together, each one more specific than the last. The clients had preferences and expectations, and their messages carried impatience when deadlines weren't met, as if they assumed compliance was guaranteed. Over time, it became clear that millionaire clients were contacting him through a deep website. It was a very large company dedicated to this type of culinary perversion, and it was an unstoppable business. Late one night, while cleaning the kitchen after another job, I stopped and realized the house wasn't designed to hide this work, it was designed to support it. That's when I understood Marcus hadn't been chasing money, he had been trying to survive something that kept pulling him deeper no matter how much he earned. The weight of it didn't arrive all at once. It built slowly through repetition, through routine, through the realization that stopping wasn't as simple as refusing an order. Every payment solved a problem while creating another one, and I saw clearly how Marcus had ended up alone with it. I started imagining him standing in the same place, making the same calculations, telling himself the same excuses, and I felt closer to him dead than I ever had when he was alive. The isolation wasn't accidental, it was the only way he could live with what he was doing. I finished the last order I had accepted not because I wanted to, but because stopping halfway felt more dangerous than finishing. When the next message arrived, I didn't respond, even though my hands hovered over the keyboard longer than I'd like to admit. Before leaving, I looked at the beam again and understood his choice not as weakness, but as exhaustion that had finally won. The money erased my debts quickly, but it didn't erase habits. I still wake up thinking about deadlines and precision, about doing things exactly the way they're expected to be done. I don't work anymore, and I try to come back to my life with my real name. Some nights I think about how easy it was to step into his place and how hard it has been to step out of it. I understand now why he couldn't keep going. Whatever I took from that house didn't stay there, and I know I won't ever be the same person again.